I've now completed transferring my value map over to my drawing space, and here's the biggest thing that wasn't discussed in the gridding video that you need to do now, which is erase your grid. Feels a little bit scary, but I promise it's going to be fine. Trust the process. So go through now, and anything that's a perfectly vertical or horizontal line, you're going to go ahead and erase it. Now that your grid is erased and you're left with just those value shapes, I want you to go through and really kind of figure out where are the dark spaces going to be, and then go through and reinforce your lines. They're about to get shaded over top of, so you want to make sure you don't completely lose them. Don't go too dark, but a little bit darker. Now we're going to complete the two value step, which is again such an important way to keep the contrast in your photo. If we tend to work only locally in one small little area, we tend to go too dark or too light, and we lose the overall impact that the drawing has. Because I went over this in depth in the gridding video, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but remember what I'm doing is I'm deciding on my lightest dark. So it's somewhere in the middle range of my value scale. If you don't have a value scale in front of you, find one that you've previously made or make another one. So everything within my dark category, so a value from a 5 to a 9, I'm going to shade in with my 5 value. When I'm done with the 2 value step, I should only have 2 values on my page, the white of the paper, which marks my lights, and my lightest dark, which is going to mark my darks. When you're done with the 2 value step, this is what it should look like. You should only have light and dark. And what you've done is you've split your drawing into 2 different categories so that you can add a ton of contrast. So now the big rule is that you can only work on top of the area that you've already shaded. So we're developing our value scale from a 5 to a 9. Now that we've developed our darks, we're going to go back and develop our lights. And remember, when we're working with our lights, there's 2 big keys. The first is that we start by shading everything except for our brightest bright. This makes sure that our highlight is truly our highlight. The next is to make sure that your darkest light doesn't get darker than your lightest dark. I know that's tricky phrasing, so again, pause if you need to and kind of absorb that information. But more or less it's saying when we're working on a value scale that we're not going to shade darker than what we started with, which is our 5. So we've developed our 5 through our 9. Now we're going to come back with our 1 through our 4. We want to make sure that that 4 doesn't get so dark that it overlaps the 5. So looking at mine, I'm going to determine, truly the only brightest bright, which by the way, I keep meaning to mention this, but a really good trick for looking at value is to squint. So if you could squint, kind of blur your vision a little bit, usually the darkest darks and the brightest brights pop out. So truly the only white is kind of this highlight shine in my eye, but we do have this kind of like light space right here in the eye, which I didn't even really map out. I didn't quite notice it. I should have squinted earlier. So I think kind of everything needs at least one little shadow shape, except for maybe that little spot in the eye. Definitely that spot in the eye, but maybe that little spot on the eyelid as well. So I'm going to go through and just give everything a shadow to start, except for those 2 spots. And remember, at this point, you're really, really light. You just wanted a hair darker than the paper. If you or your student is struggling, remember to turn your artwork upside down. The grid is going to work the exact same way, and then it will help them see value shapes instead of thinking, oh, I'm drawing a nose and my nose looks too big or my nose is whatever. It just breaks it down into shapes, and it's a lot easier for your brain to kind of process and simplify what you're doing. I know it bothers people that I color so far outside the lines, but that's what erasers are for. Okay, so my first blanket color is down. My first blanket value is down. Now the highlight should pop a little bit more, and now I'm going to keep working on top of those lights to go ahead and meet with that 5 value, that lightest dark. Before we move on to details, remember to play the game of what is missing or what's different and look back and forth and just try to look at the major value shapes. I think the first thing that stands out to me is that this has become a highlight on my drawing, and it's not really one here. It's a couple shades darker than here, and definitely a lot of shades darker than this really bright highlight right here. So I'm going to go through and add this on here. We're about to get all the texture in a bit, but that really is a last step. I think people get kind of bogged down on the texture early, and then it messes up the overall contrast in their drawing. I want to make sure we save that for the end, especially because it's really hard lines in there. And we're going to want to go back and do this step again before we're done, because once we add all those details in there, things are going to look a little bit different. I need to also darken this. Okay, so let's talk about all of those little details. So we don't want to draw a ton of eyelashes where they don't exist. If you really look at this, they're sparse, especially on the top. Because the photograph is coming straight from where the eyelashes are, we more or less see a bold black line, which I kind of already have there, and then textured little bits where we're seeing either the beginning or the end of eyelashes. So the way I'm going to handle this is I'm going to go back and I'm going to look. Remember, your reference is going to tell you everything that you need to know. So I'm going to look at the reference and I'm going to see that, yeah, I'm really not, all I'm seeing is basically darker shapes kind of within here and then a bumpy top. And I'm not copying each bump exactly. I'm just taking the information that I can see here and kind of pulling it this way. Now, as we get more towards the inside corner of my eye, I'm seeing more eyelashes. And that's not a hard and fast rule for every eye. That's just looking at this particular eye. So we've got one eyelash, let's see. Kind of up here. There's kind of a dark lead up to that. And then the line of my lash line gets like a little bump here because I think we're seeing more of the lashes. So notice that there's a gap always where your eyelashes are. It's not right coming out of your eyeball, it's coming out of the end of the lid. So I'm just going to go through, I'm trying to look at kind of the distance and the angle. And then I'm wearing makeup in this photo, so there's a couple lashes that are a little bit thinner than other ones. And about here, they start to turn more front facing. And then they're a little bit smaller coming this direction. And again, don't overemphasize it. I know it's kind of tempting. People like to have their lashes look good, but it's going to stand out in a really negative way if you do too much. Now I'm going to go ahead and address the eyebrow. So eyebrows are typically thicker. You can see individual hairs, but not so much at the middle. If you look right here, if I were to just take a circle and show that to you, it's really only your blackest black and a light dark. So I'm going to just texture the front half and the end. And I think I'm done with what I want to show you today. As I've discussed before, there's always more that you can do in an artwork. It's going to drive me crazy because I'm already looking at things I want to lighten up, like this little crease underneath the eye. But for the sake of showing you how to do this project, I think you get the gist of it. Remember, if you want to use a blending stump, you can. Make sure you're staying within the same value shape at a time so that you're blending in texture more than smoothing in values. If you felt like you learned from this video, please subscribe. That's the best way that you can support me so I can continue to support you in your artistic journey or in your classroom. Don't forget too, I have a whole packet of resources that goes with this project, including all the lead-up activities from the 3 videos that you watched before the MicroPortrait videos. I hope art finds you in life, even in the little ways, and I hope that you are trusting the process and following the fun. If you have any comments or questions, please do that below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you for the next project.